did you see Julian last? When did you see Julian last, Stella?
Well, I actually saw him yesterday, yesterday afternoon, so not so long ago. And I see him about once or twice a week. And he... Yep. Sure. He was... This week he has a typewriter, which is something that's new.
Typewriter?
Yeah, he's not allowed access to the internet. He has a laptop, but there's no writing software on it, which is you know, a terrible punishment for someone who writes so much, like Julian does, of course. So he had been asking for a typewriter for some time. I mean, for years actually, but now
so
he
the
has.
Old click-to-click,
yes,
old-fashioned typewriter we left 20 or 25 years ago.
That's right, old-fashioned typewriter, and this has given him a lot of. Well, it's been a nice change to his prison environment, his cell environment.
But this is obviously a good sign. I mean, I too probably would be extremely pleased with that typewriter, but how is he otherwise?
Well, every day is a struggle. He's suffering in there, of course. He is extremely isolated. He has to eat alone in his cell. His contact with the outside world is extremely limited. He can call me and a few other people. He can call his lawyers. Everything's recorded, of course. Our conversations are limited to 10 minutes at a time. And then it cuts off, and then we have to wait until he can call me back, and I'm not able to call him. But we speak during the day unless there's some technical problem or he runs out of credit, because it's incredible. The prison system is it's quite a business for the phone service, and you know, he has to pay, I have to pay. And sometimes there's a limit to how much you can charge up, so sometimes he runs out. His physical health is not good, obviously deteriorating over time, steadily deteriorating. He gets no more than an hour outside of, well, in the open air, in a concrete yard, and very, very little interaction with other people, usually about 21, 22, sometimes 23 hours a day in his cell. He can, except the days when he has visits, in which case he's out of cell for maybe a couple of hours or a bit more, but part of that will be in holding cells as he's taken to another part of the prison.
And actually, this is the time where I say that Stella is not only Mrs. Assange. Can you say that, Mrs. Assange? She's not only married to Julian, but she's of course a human rights advocate, and you hold degrees from SOAS, School of Asian and African Oriental Studies at the University of London, where I actually taught some classes many years ago, and a master from Oxford and from Complutense in Madrid. And then this has turned you into a human rights advocate, and that is how you started to work on, well, as a human rights advocate for Julian. And then since then, you have formed a family to the extent that has been possible with his terrible conditions, and you have 2 boys together.
Yeah, that's right. We have our youngest is going to turn 5 in a couple of months, and our eldest is 6.5. So he was born in 2017, and the first year and a half of his life, he would visit Julian inside the embassy under, you know, extreme surveillance, and even our eldest, who was just a baby, was the target of surveillance operations. We found out after Julian was arrested that the security company working inside the embassy had instructions, not from Ecuador, but from United States agencies to collect the nappy of our 6-month-old in order to analyze the DNA. So even our children have been, the targets of these abuses.
There are some photos where you see Julian and the little boy being incredibly happy. So, in spite of all of this, you managed that too.
Yeah, and I think it's important to stay human and nurture humanity, in whatever way you can. And obviously, I think it's been really important for both of us to be able to see each other during this time, even though it's been very limited. When we go, I take the children to see Julian on weekends in the prison. It's only about an hour and a half that we get to spend together, but it's very it keeps us united and is a highlight of our week to see each other, even under these insane circumstances.
So now to you as a human rights advocate and not the mother and wife, but how can these extreme security restrictions be justified in Julian's case?
Well, they're not. There's just you see, when it comes to Julian, it seems that the exception is the norm, and the only, if you enter this with the framework that this is how the legal system normally behaves, then you don't understand anything. But when you understand that this is a political case and that basically norms are stretched, distorted, and undermined in the process in order to keep him imprisoned, that's because there are other interests other than justice that are in operation. And so that's why we have a legal process that is behaving unpredictably, extremely harshly. Julian is not convicted of any crime, and yet he's in the harshest prison in the United Kingdom. And the United Kingdom is a country that where you only serve about 50% of your custodial sentence, which means that people who have been convicted to 9 years of prison have already been to prison and served their sentence and been released in the time that Julian has been spent inside Belmarsh prison 4.5 years. So that's just to, you can dress things up in process and all sorts of administrative justifications, but you have to look at the situation in terms of the real impact, the reality of it, and you have a man who has not been convicted of anything, and when you look at the accusations, these are completely political accusations and politically motivated accusations, who is basically indefinitely detained in extremely, the harshest conditions possible.
So in 2015, this UN working group on arbitrary detention, we heard reference made to it here in the case concerning the Moroccan detainee, held that Julian was subjected to arbitrary detention in violation of international law. And this is when he was still in the embassy where he had sought asylum. how has the international reaction been since that ruling by this working group of the United Nations?
Well, I think the working group's determination was really a turning point, because the working group had been considering the information that it had received. It was it was an adversarial process. He got the application from Julian, and then the response by Sweden and the UK defending their position, and then the working group taking into account all the information that had been presented, ruled that Julian was arbitrarily detained, and the UK reacted very badly, and then tried to undermine the credibility of the working group, and said some pretty outrageous things. And this is incredibly short-sighted, of course, because they rely on the working group regularly when it concerns
Iran, Russia,
exactly.
Whichever country you do not like, you like to use the UN as a witness to the human rights violations taking place there in those countries you don't like.
Precisely, and talking about the independence and the expertise, which is correct. So there was a backlash, and I think it was a difficult but incredibly important decision by the working group, which of course has been vindicated subsequently, partly because there have been freedom of information disclosures during this time. There's an Italian investigative journalist who has written a book called WikiLeaks and Its Enemies. It's translated into English and German and French. And she based this book basically on reconstructing all this information that she managed to obtain through disclosure, through making applications. And she didn't obtain everything. And through these applications, she also learned that the United Kingdom and Sweden had destroyed a lot of the official document, the correspondence. But a great deal of information is known, and it completely vindicates the working group's conclusions that behind the scenes, these two countries were secretly colluding to keep Julian from being able to defend himself, ensuring that he remained detained, ensuring that he was in a kind of legal limbo where he wasn't charged of anything, so he couldn't have access to any exculpatory evidence, and that the UK was saying, no, you don't question him, he should be remain in the embassy basically without being questioned, because if you question him, then it might fall apart, basically. So that was the first decision, I think it was made public in 2016.
Yes.
And then there was, since then there has been the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, UN Special Rapporteur on Privacy, and a number of others who have also pronounced themselves, especially in the lead up to his arrest, because it was clear that his political asylum was basically about to be revoked for political reasons. And I actually met with the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, the previous one, Bachelet, and she also put out a statement saying that she was very concerned.
They've been very clear. So at the international level, this has been clarified in a way which can't really be challenged. I must say that I was pleased what you said about the working group, because I was chairing the working group in the period leading up to this this ruling. So I followed the case very, very closely, also in a formal sense from then on, and then afterwards. All these other UN authorities, as you say, have been extremely clear about the violations of international law, freedom of expression, information, arbitrary detention, the conditions constituting of his detention before the high security detention, and now constituting torture. And torture, isn't that among the worst things a country can be accused of, or actually being condemned for by a United Nations body? What is worse? There must be genocide, huh?
Well, it's one of these absolute prohibitions. You cannot torture an individual. You have to treat them with dignity and humanity, and but it is cruel and inhuman treatment, clearly, that has been meted on Julian. And it's quite telling that when the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, Niels Meltzer, who subsequently wrote a book about Julian's case, which I highly recommend, that when he was writing his report and asking the UK for its feedback on his findings, that they basically didn't engage. And this is you don't engage when you have no arguments to bring. And of course, I mean, any independent observer can see that Julian's treatment is cruel, and it's sort of a parade of cruelty. It's there's this public-facing, making an example of him aspect to it that is very, very deliberate. It's not just that. I don't think it doesn't just serve the purpose of silencing him, which obviously that is one purpose, to try to remove him from public life, to remove his voice from public debate, and to silence him, and ultimately to try to shut down WikiLeaks. Right? That's part of it. But it's also to make an example of him and to intimidate, bully, and chill the press, and to parade him around as if, if anyone else gets ideas like this to expose powerful interests, then this is what happens to you, and surely you're not going to risk it. So that's part of it. It's they're putting his head on a pike. That's a deliberate strategy.
So to you and to the others, we have to ask about what happens in the UK process. Where do we stand there? And then we have to ask, well, if the UK process fails, he is extradited, or there's a legal decision to extradite, then what about the European Human Rights Court? And what else is happening at the US side? And then, what's happening in the UK?
Well, in the UK, you see, this process has been going for 4.5 years, and the short story is that Julian has not been permitted to appeal the decision to extradite him. So there's 3 levels of the court. There's the magistrates' court, there's a high court, and there's a Supreme Court. And he has put in an appeal to the high court, and that request for an appeal, because it's not automatic, that's been rejected. So the high court has said, we're not even going to hear your arguments, which is extraordinary when you think that this is the defining case on press freedom globally. You couldn't have a more clear-cut case where you have publication evidencing the reality of war crimes and human rights abuse and torture and so on. You have all the press freedom organizations saying this case is an attack on journalism itself. This is extremely dangerous. This biggest attack on journalism, globally speaking. He's a foreign citizen in a foreign country, publishing true information that's damning and indicting of the country that's trying to extradite him. So it couldn't be clearer. And you have all the human rights organizations, Amnesty International and so on, saying this is a political persecution, it's politically motivated and so on. And yet the High Court says, we're not even going to hear your arguments. So that's where the stage is at. And there is a final recourse for him to be able to ask for a review of this decision. The decision not to hear his case was taken by a single judge behind closed doors on the papers. The review will be a public hearing before 2 judges, and they could reverse the decision, but obviously it's an uphill battle now because as it stands, there's a High Court ruling that he should be extradited and no appeal will be heard. It could be reversed, but if it's not reversed, that's the end of the line in the United Kingdom. And then there is an avenue, of course, to appeal to the European Court of Human Rights. The UK's approach to the European Court of Human Rights.
Skeptical at best, huh?
Skeptical, and of course the UK is not politically, I wouldn't describe it as a very politically stable place. Stability in the sense that, well, yes, there has been a conservative government for 13 years or so, but they've had lots of prime ministers. Just yesterday there was a cabinet reshuffle. The Home Secretary was thrown out. They lost an important case at the Supreme Court to do with the European Court of Human Rights on the Rwanda asylum seekers.
Basically shipping asylum seekers to Rwanda while they decide on whether they are going to be granted refugee status or not.
Yes, that's right. And but the European Court of Human Rights for the right, like the conservatives of the UK, it's kind of the new Brexit frontier. It's the new, it's a vote winner. That the public likes that argument because it's the outside, imposing these European judges. It's very strange. So the European Court of Human Rights is definitely an avenue that Julian will seek to appeal to, but again, the UK's behaviour is unpredictable, and
what you're actually looking for is a court which can hear his complaint against being extradited to the US, and we're getting to the end of our talk, but what is happening in the US? What can he expect in the US? And are there any political developments or legal developments in the US which gives any hope?
Well, whereas what I've been describing is a quite a dire and precarious legal situation where the case is coming to a head, and he may be literally could be extradited within a matter of months, if not weeks, if it goes in a worst case scenario. Politically, the situation has improved over time, and that's in large part thanks to huge global citizenship mobilization around the world. I was just in Naples last week, where Julian has been given honorary citizenship. Rome has also granted Julian honorary citizenship, and a number of other Italian cities. In Australia, Julian has enormous support. Over between 85 and 90% of the Australian population want Julian to be released and come home. The Australian government has said he should be released. And in the United States, just this week, there has been a publicized letter from members of Congress, both senators and representatives in the lower house, who have signed on to this letter asking Biden to drop the case. And this is not just some fringe figures. This is it was led by two kind of very centrist figures, including the Democrat ranking member of the House Rules Committee, Jim McGovern, who's very much at the center of the Democratic Party. So this is a major shift, and I think it kind of reinforces the fact that this case has always been extremely controversial within the United States. It is seen as an attack on the First Amendment, on the press, setting a precedent that can be used against the rest of the press. It's an unpopular case, and that's why I think that the political mobilization, the popular mobilization, really can set him free.
So what we have to do here then, I expect, is to be tying a Norwegian part in this global mobilization, and today is one thing we could do as a Norwegian pen club. And then of course, very happy to hear about Julian and the books. We are the pen club after all. And then, so are we then supposed to send him books then, you think? Google Belmarsh prison and send him a good translation of into English of a Norwegian book or something else? Will that be welcome? He'll fill up another bed in his cell?
Well, I mean, you can try. If you Google "write to Julian Assange," you get the instructions of how to do that. But I mean, the prison keeps on saying he's over quota, so it's an ongoing struggle. But there's a lot that can be done. Obviously, the prize today is incredibly important, keeping Julian at the forefront of the debate, because his case is defining of our generation, of the public's right to know, whether the West is now a place of imprisoning dissidents and journalists, or whether it's not. That's defined with this case, and at the moment, the West is failing very badly. There has to be a correction, of course, because you can't keep Julian imprisoned and continue and pretend like everything will continue as before. You need to corrupt the system in order to keep him imprisoned, and so that's the real battle. There are many ways to support there's a website called Don't Extradite Assange. Free Assange Emergency Toolkit.com has specific actions. In terms of citizen mobilizations, I believe that there are similar actions that can be taken in Norway of granting honorary citizenship at kind of a municipal level. That's something perhaps that some people might be interested in this room. And obviously those in a position to do so, if they wish to contribute financially to the legal or campaign efforts, then that's of course welcome. But mainly to stay informed, engaged in this case, to talk about Julian's case, to read the books. That's incredibly important as well.
Thank you. Stella is not only a stellar human rights advocate, but a tireless one. And thank you for coming here and giving us this focus in what is an ongoing campaign.
Thank you.